Hey there, podcast family. How are we doing? This is Dr. Ruben Valdez joining you for another episode of Under the Avocado Tree. Today, I have the privilege and the honor to interview Dr. Whitney out of Madison, Wisconsin. Dr. Whitney has been involved in natural health and very interested in natural health since she was very young, a natural-born athlete, passionate about natural medicine. She studied her naturopathic degree in out of Chicago, a place that's very near and dear to my heart, National University of Health Sciences. In my opinion, one of the best and greatest schools for naturopathic medicine. She graduated out of there 2014. Is that right, Dr. Whitney?
Yeah, that's correct.
Excellent, excellent. Once she graduated, she began doing house calls, explored working with other providers, and then ultimately started her own shop, her own place, which she has been running now for 6 years. As part of her mission, she is also an educator. So in a little bit, she'll provide her Facebook site, out of which she does a lot of informative presentations and talks, things that are of super high interest for families, for children. And she's now chosen to focus on inflammation and toxins for families, which is one of the reasons that I'm so excited about the interview today, because it's so relevant to everything that's going on with this craziness of COVID-19. Before we started, she let me know I've been talking COVID-19 till I'm blue in the face. And I told her that's crazy because me too. But it's the topic that everybody's looking for direction, for certainty, for understanding in right now. And before I introduce Dr. Whitney today, we want to focus on food, which Dr. Whitney believes is one of the most critical pieces to supporting immunity, to reducing inflammation, to reducing triggers that would create dysfunction in the immune system. So excited to learn what you have to share with us today. Welcome to the show, Dr. Whitney. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to share this knowledge and experience that I've had with this. Just is so incredible, and the results speak for themselves. So I'm really excited to have a platform to share that today.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, let's begin talking about food sensitivities. For people that maybe have never heard of that term before, or that are not as familiar, kind of run through with us what that means really for someone that might have food sensitivities. What kind of effect does it have on their immune system? Help us understand a little bit more about that.
Sure. So I think the first thing to really clarify is the difference between food sensitivities or allergies and food intolerances. So as a naturopathic doctor, within our profession, we have an elder, you might call him, Dr. O.G. Carroll, and he developed this method of identifying food groups and combinations of food that are essentially incompatible with someone's body. And what that means is it's not just a digestive thing, but it goes a step further into how does what's been broken down then affect the body. And what Dr. Carroll found was that basically it became toxins, is like the oversimplified, easiest way to say this. We call them metabolic toxins or toxic metabolites. And so those things can go and disrupt any organ, any system in the body. They cause chronic inflammation because it's stuff you're putting in your body again and again and again over time. So this method is called the Carroll method from Dr. Carroll, and it's only done by naturopathic doctors who have either attended the Carroll Institute's training or work with doctors that are a part of the Carroll Institute. So I worked with them for several years, and then a couple of years ago I was able to go out and do the training myself, and now I can run my patient samples myself, which is fabulous. They get the results within 24 hours. I still send them off to the Institute for confirmation. But ultimately, what that tells me is what's causing the damage inside someone's body, what's causing the inflammation. And food sensitivities and allergies are actually a result of having food intolerances, because when you have the inflammation and the damage that it causes in your digestive system, you essentially get leaky gut. So really what food sensitivity testing in the simplest sense is doing is identifying that you have leaky gut. And that means things get outside of your digestive system, and that triggers your immune system to respond. So if your immune system is too busy reacting to foods that are outside of the digestive system, it's going to have a lot less energy to focus on something like an infection. And there are true food allergies. That's an IgE response. We understand what food sensitivity and allergy tests are generally looking at. A lot of the more popular ones are IgG responses of the immune system, which are delayed. So that's kind of where the food sensitivity chip falls compared to someone who might say needs an EpiPen for a bee sting. That would be an IgE type 1 hypersensitivity reaction. So that's the biggest component usually of explaining to someone who is new to this arena, the differences and how, you know, maybe they've had food sensitivities identified before, you know, but they didn't get all the way better. Well, it's because they still weren't addressing the fundamental problem, which was the inflammation and the damage that was being done. So I know that was a lot right off the bat,
No,
but
it's great.
That's the big overarching explanation.
Very good. So just to make sure I understand, food allergies, IgE mediated response, type 1 hypersensitivity. So that's the one that people eat the peanut, they can't breathe, they got to go to the hospital, get an EpiPen shot. Underneath that or around that, food sensitivity, which is also so from what you're saying, a more delayed type immune response. But at the core of that, before these things actually develop, then there's food intolerance, which is at the root of these food reactivity issues. Okay, so when you talk about testing, are you guys testing the intolerances? Are you guys testing the sensitivities? How are you coming about that information?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's outside of what a lot of people understand in conventional medicine, because we're not really looking at the blood under a microscope. We're not really looking at how cells interact. And so this goes back to a time when, you know, doctors were just developing diagnostic methods. And so there were a lot of methodologies out there about how people decided what was the actual problem a patient was having and how they were going to resolve it. So Dr. Abrams was, I believe, a professor of physiology. It's one of the Ivy League schools, and he developed, I don't want to say a hypothesis, but like a methodology basically of everything has frequency. And so he was measuring different frequencies of the body, and his life's work was essentially figuring out what organs and what systems had what frequencies in the body. And if he could measure a disturbance in the frequency, that the frequency was off, then he knew that that organ or system was being affected. So Dr. Carroll then took that information and basically applied it to food. So he sort of created a circuit. So it's the person, the food, and the frequency. And so what we're doing is taking a dried blood sample, similar to how a diabetic tests their glucose, just a finger prick, few drops of blood on a sample paper, and we're introducing that into a circuitry, which we then see if there is an interruption to the frequency. And what that tells us then is that that person is incompatible with that particular food group. And we try different foods, we try different combinations. Ultimately, what Dr. Carroll figured out is that there are 5 pretty big main food intolerance groups. So you've got dairy, sugar, potato, fruit, and egg. And then you have the combinations, and it can be any combination of those or of other things. The most popular are usually fruit and refined sugar, or potato and grain. There are other ones, but that's sort of the easiest overview. So again, when you're talking about individual medicine, and I just did a great talk about this in my hometown where I live right now a few weeks ago, because everybody in the new year wants a new diet and they want, make changes for the better. And I always get a handful of people that come in at the beginning of the year. The best example I have is a gal whose sister went paleo. It cured up all her thyroid problems. And so this gal tried it and it made all her problems worse. And she said, well, I don't understand. Like, I went paleo. It's supposed to be anti-inflammatory. It's supposed to be so great for me. Well, I did her food intolerance. And what we found is that she was intolerant to eggs. So on the paleo diet, she went from someone who wasn't really eating maybe 1 or 2 eggs a week to eating 4 or 5 a day. Wow. And so there's nothing wrong with these dietary approaches. They have good intentions and they're, trying to clean out the junk and get people on the right track with whole foods and nutritious foods, but it's still not individual enough. So that's the part I think that really catches most people's interest, is because they're already doing keto, or they're already doing paleo, or they're doing gluten-free or grain-free. And this just further refines it for them as an individual so they can maximize their health and healing.
Excellent. So here's what blows my mind about this is that I know that the work of A.G. Carroll predates a lot of the genetic sequencing and a lot of the stuff that is being used as foundational information between a mismatch between lifestyle, environment, diet, and genetics. And interestingly, the same conclusions, sugar, grain, starches, and some of these other food groups that we know, it's really hard to generalize, of course, and say, hey, everybody or nobody. But for the most part, these tend to be very consistent, mismatches between the population and their lifestyle and their actual genetic response to these foods. So at the end of the day, it makes so much sense because we're all energy, right? We're all frequency. And when there's disruption in that, but I find it just blows my mind how accurate that discovery is, and still, with modern genetic sequencing telling us kind of the same thing. This is really cool. So let's talk through those 5 groups again, just in case there's people out there that are making notes. Help us understand a little bit more about each one.
Sure. So like I said, there are more, but the 5 most common ones tend to be sugar, which is generally refined sugar. So what I tell people is the more natural the source, the better it is. And so when I write reports for people based on their results, it will have examples in there. These lists aren't all inclusive. There is a database from the Carroll Institute that I have a membership through that my patients can access. So you can get lots and lots of more information. But the big ones I think that surprise people, I kind of divide the category into good and bad sugars just to make this easy for people. And, the bad sugars include a lot of things people understand, white sugar, brown sugar, high fructose corn syrup, obviously all the chemical sweeteners are out like aspartame. But the ones that surprise people the most, I think, on the bad list are beet sugar and cane sugar. So cane sugar is actually I should back up. Sugar is my primary intolerance, which stinks for me because my family, anybody who knows my family knows we have a huge sweet tooth. So trying to be healthy, trying to be organic, you would be shocked when you go do your shopping and really start reading the labels and the ingredients, how many organic or health food-based products have cane sugar in some form in them. And it could even be organic evaporated cane juice. It's still cane sugar. So what we say to people is that one of those things that's just been refined too much, too far away from its natural source, that basically to our body, it's kind of like a foreign thing. And our body doesn't really know how to deal with that. And that causes a lot of stress, which we know leads to all kinds of inflammation. And it just disrupts the whole flow of, healing and the positive feedback in the body. So that one I think surprises a lot of people, especially because a lot of healthy cookbooks I see now too will call for beet sugar in them. And they think that that's, healthy because it was in this healthy cookbook.
Right.
But there are good sweeteners out there. You can still use honey. You can still use maple syrup, or coconut palm sugar is a fantastic one. Monk fruit, erythritol, stevia, xylitol. There's lots of great ones out there. And the good thing about some of them is that they are low glycemic index too. So like coconut palm sugar, we know is so low, it's basically zero and considered sugar-free and safe for diabetics. So that's the kind of stuff I can get into category to category for people. You know, other than that, I think dairy is pretty straightforward. It just seems like to me, the more we mess with nature's products, you know, the more of an issue they become. Eggs and fruit people struggle with, I know, because they seem like they should be healthy, but it's just, I tell people to think about it in the sense that our bodies can handle a lot. They really can. They're great at coping. And I think it's just kind of like, you get these 5 things and your body says, I can do 4 of them. I can't do all 5, you know, and one of them is just like too big of an ask for some reason, you know? Right. So yeah, it depends on the individual. There's usually a lot more I can say about, you know, the categories in trying to help people understand why they get very disappointed in Wisconsin when you tell them they're dairy intolerant. No more cheese curds.
Yeah, I can imagine how that would be a problem for sure.
Yeah.
And so help us understand a little bit of behind the scenes, right? When these food intolerances begin to drive inflammation, they begin to drive toxicity. Right now, a lot of people are wanting to know, how can I improve my immunity? How can I support my immunity? You know, specifically these domains around viruses. Help us understand, if you can, the effect that these food intolerances can have on our immunity, and the benefit that we can experience as we begin to learn about them, improve on the stuff that we're putting into our system.
Sure. So actually, this is a really easy one, and I love this question because naturopathic doctors will tell you the first thing that gets ingrained in us is the gut is the foundation. The gut is the foundation of everything. I mean, Hippocrates even said it, you know, thousands of years ago. And what we understand today is that 70 to 80% of our immune systems, the cells that make up the immune system, is in your gut. So if your gut is inflamed, if your gut is damaged, your immune system is not going to be strong. I mean, that's 70 to 80% of your immune system. Think about that if that's compromised. You know, there's a reason that we take probiotics, and it's not all just for digestion. Yes, it helps because we're putting the good bacteria in that help us with that process and keeping the bad guys out. But ultimately, we're keeping that environment strong and healthy for the immune system. So I always kind of have that little talk with patients who are newer to the realm of probiotics, and they'll say, yeah, but my digestion's fine. My regularity is fine. I'm not gassy. I'm not bloated. I say, okay, but you've told me here in your history that, you know, you have 3 rounds of sinus infections every winter. You get the flu every fall. You know, you have skin issues, or, you know, sniffly noses, and, you know, throughout the year. And I said, what if I told you that all came from your gut? You know, that if you took probiotics and you changed your diet and you just did those 2 things, that you could get rid of that stuff. And people are always shocked by that. But it makes sense. Our gut is a direct reflection of our skin as well. So if the gut is unhealthy, you see it in the skin. We're actually the same cells on the inside as on the outside. I know it's weird, mini anatomy lesson here for you. Maybe it's more embryology, but you're just a ball of cells when you form, and then you turn into a tube, like a paper towel. So everything that was on the outside goes on the inside. And so when your gut can't do what it needs to do and it's damaged, it's looking for backup. It's looking for help. So again, the gut is the foundation. There's 70 to 80% of your immune system there. And if you're ever really curious about the true health of your gut, look at your skin. And a lot of people have skin complaints, a lot of them. But we change the gut, you know, we add healthy probiotics in, do more anti-inflammatory stuff than inflammatory stuff, and we can tip the scales back in your favor and make that immune system strong and healthy again.
Very good. And would you mind sharing perhaps one or two experiences? Because I think people tend to connect a lot with, cases and the stories of patients that have maybe presented in a certain way, and then through some of the modifications that you've been able to recommend and introduce. Are there, off the top of your head, recent cases that you might have seen challenges with inflammation, with the immune system, and then how does that look as a person begins to improve through these lifestyle changes? What are some of the outcomes that they can see?
Sure. So I think I've got two pretty good examples. One was a gentleman who maybe about a year ago came in, and he was having his third relapse with a C. diff infection. And if anybody knows anything about C. diff, it is a nasty infection. It takes a really strong hold, and it can be really, really hard to get rid of. And essentially, conventional medicine solution to this is just round after round after round of antibiotics and mixing up antibiotics and trying different combinations of antibiotics. And as we just talked about, 70 to 80% of your immune system is in your gut. And so when you take antibiotics, you're also wiping out those guys. The antibiotics wipe out the good with the bad, and it takes a lot to build that back up. So you're very susceptible in between those rounds as well. That's why he kept experiencing these reinfections. So we changed his diet, which was the first thing based on his food intolerance. And we did that right away. And I would say he noticed a change within a week right away of, I would say, digestive distress type feelings without getting too much into it. And then we added a few specific botanicals that were known to help with C. diff infections. So again, bacterial stuff, viral stuff. There's a plethora of botanical medicine out there that can be specific to these things. So his was a unique case. It wasn't just food, but definitely I think for him, once he got through the 2 or 3 weeks of taking the products, he saw sustained health going forward after that. He, in a year and a half, has not contacted me about having another relapse, and he continues to follow, his food intolerance results. He said he sleeps better, he feels more clear-headed, and he hasn't had any other illnesses. So I think that is a really strong testament to how bad of an infection you can have, whether it's bacterial or viral, and what a difference it can make when you free up your body's resources for your immune system to actually deal with the infection instead of dealing with food that's not compatible with your body.
That's amazing. That's exciting.
Yeah. And I guess the other one I think of more, it was a younger gal who was on several different medications for autoimmune type diagnoses. She never really had a solid diagnosis. She had gone down the path of Lyme disease and, fibromyalgia and MS, and they just had her on a bunch of different things. But same thing. She had so many things going on. I said, let's just not go crazy with products. Let's just do the food first and see where that gets you. And then, you can talk to your doctor about your prescriptions. And as you feel like you don't need them as much, you can make a plan with him on how to, back off of that. And then we can see if it still warrants any kind of natural supplementation. And she did just a very, very basic, like liver and kidney sort of homeopathic cleanse of her own accord while we were doing this. But she implemented her food intolerance changes, and within 1 month, between her food intolerance and just the general detox, she got off all of her medications in 6 weeks. So she was just beyond happy because she hadn't gotten straight answers for years and was basically told, it's some kind of autoimmune thing. We don't know what it is, and it's only going to get worse. And it's just going to take finding the right pharmaceutical cocktail to manage your symptoms. So she was really, really excited, and she continues to check in with me every few months and has said, I can tell when I start eating the things I shouldn't because some of my symptoms start to come back,
Mm-hmm.
So those are some of the more significant recent
Nice.
kind of cases that I can think of. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. So let me see if I can wrap my head around every piece of this. Food intolerances, there can be many, and I'm assuming this needs to be tested to be able to identify the unique intolerances of each individual, but in general, there can be 5 that seem to be problematic for most.
Mm-hmm.
Eggs, sugar, fruits, dairy.
Yep.
And which one am I missing?
Potato.
Potato.
Yeah, so
Very
it's
good.
usually one of those. It's usually one primary intolerance and then a combination. That's generally what people have. Some people have 2 kind of main groups, but it's not common.
Okay, very good. So from there, when these changes happen, right, when they begin to eliminate the things that are driving this intolerance, which creates inflammation, a certain degree of toxicity, according to what you're saying. Once this stuff is out, inflammation normalizes, the gut has the ability to then begin to be supported, to repair, right? And overall inducing or producing a better functioning immune system, or a better functioning, I'm assuming, everything really, right?
Yeah, overall, yeah, that would be the idea.
Right, because inflammation, we know, is one of the hugest triggers for chronic disease, chronic problems. So are there foods that you would specifically say, I'm assuming there can be no general rule here, but are there foods that you would specifically recommend for somebody that's needing that boost, that stimulation of their immune system? And so interesting that you talk about the gut and probiotics. Interestingly, out of the COVID-19 prevention and treatment manual that came out of China and South Korea, they're saying that about 23% of patients with COVID-19 will actually begin with gastrointestinal symptoms. They're going to start with diarrhea or bloating, loose stools, and it only kind of, the next thing that comes to my mind is like leaky gut, right into the bloodstream, you know. So they were talking about use of probiotics in China and South Korea to support immunity from the gut in assistance to, you know, for these viral type infections. So are there things that foods, any nutrients, anything that you would recommend as a supportive system for people that are wanting to prevent?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting. I've been sort of trying to put something together like that for a couple weeks now as I muddle through this even myself. There's so much information out there, and trying to get through it all, you know, week to week, and figuring out, you know, what is just, you know, somebody saying something and what has a little bit of evidence or research behind it. You know, we're not supposed to be going out there yelling cure or treatment, because a lot of the natural stuff, hasn't been studied in the sense of, you know, clinical trials and things like that. But we know from thousands of years of, you know, natural medicine and botanical medicine that these things have properties that can help support the body. We're not saying antiviral, because antiviral, it implies that we're actually killing the virus, and we're not. The virus really isn't, I mean, there's argument about this, right? But a virus isn't, you can argue that it's not really alive, because the only way it lives is if it can get into your body and use parts of your DNA to replicate itself. So really what we're doing when we're using natural things or nutrients, food is medicine, is we're trying to interfere with the process in which the virus gets in which it binds, in which it replicates. So you can kind of think about it as creating a stronger resiliency, maybe, or a stronger response to being exposed to, I don't even say infected with, you know, a virus, or any kind of infection for that matter. So there are very general things that we've talked about, like probiotics, you know, anti-inflammatory type foods or supplements, things that you would get maybe from cod liver oil is a great example. I personally am a really big advocate for trying to use things that are as much food-based rather than product based.
Yeah.
And I know that gets confusing, because I'm saying like, oh, but take probiotics. There are things that the amount we need to make a therapeutic effect in the body would be such a high dose. For instance, with probiotics, people say, well, I eat my yogurt or my kefir every day. If you look at the label, those things are generally in the millions. So we want billions. I mean, you like a case of yogurt every day, you know, and so that's great. I mean, if you want to eat a case of yogurt, you know, eat a case of yogurt, but I don't have time to do that. I don't have time to drink 25 cups of green tea every day either.
Right, right.
I do drink my green tea.
Eat 30 oranges.
Right, but I do also take, you know, an EGCG, you know, capsule, which is the great antioxidant that you get from green tea. So as much as I can, I tell people, you know, think about, you know, your foods, eating the good quality foods, you know, cutting out the refined sugar and stuff like that. But focusing on the rainbow really seems to be a big theme for people. The more colorful your produce, your veggies and fruits are, the more nutrients you're going to get from them. All the things that we are really trying to get in our bodies anyways when we're taking supplements. So, I think some of the big ones I talked about last week were the probiotics, cod liver oil, and then vitamin C and vitamin D. So again, you know, cod liver oil is a great source of vitamin D, but if you don't feel like that's something you want to take, you can just take a vitamin D supplement. Vitamin C, obviously, lots of citrus fruit, we know that. But again, if people feel like, you know, I can't eat a bag of oranges every week, then go ahead and, you know, then take that. But try to find a whole food based supplement is really my biggest takeaway.
Huge.
Yeah, that's going to be the most bioavailable, the easiest for your body to recognize, break down, and absorb and get the most out of. Other than that, if you're looking for like things around the house, I know quercetin was something that I came across. Again, it's a bioflavonoid. It comes from things that are like yellow. I looked this up at one point, but you have to double check me. There's a reason I picked yellow onions. So every time I start to get sick, I do a saute of spinach, organic spinach, an organic yellow onion, and some free range, you know, grass fed, really good chicken or meat or poultry or whatever you want to get your hands on. And I kind of just saute all that up with as much garlic as you can stand, or that your partner can stand.
Or that the neighborhood may stand.
Oh, it just comes right out of the pores. But, you know, we know garlic is one of the easiest things that a lot of people have on hand at home. Fresh garlic, just crush it up, mince it up, throw it in the pan with some, you know, good cooking oil like coconut or avocado, something that has a high heat index, and you'll get so many nutrients and minerals from the spinach, and like I said, the quercetin, especially from the onion, and the garlic. Oh my gosh, garlic is antibacterial, antifungal, antiviral. It's got lots of great properties. So you can use a lot of food as medicine. Now is the time. Everybody's at home. Start cooking, experimenting, eating as much superfoods. I've been seeing a lot of people talk about get as much superfoods as you can into your diet. And again, that all comes back to keeping the gut strong, keeping the immune system strong. You know, you can add in sauerkraut or kimchi or kombucha or whatever fermented foods you want to. They're all great. You really can't go wrong as long as you're staying away from added refined sugar, you know, gluten, and poor quality sources of dairy. That's the stuff that gets, you know, as you said, a general rule. If I wanted to give general information to people before I give them their food intolerance results, those are the things I say. Everybody benefits from, you know, no junk food, refined sugar, you know, limiting or removing gluten or poor quality sources of dairy. So, you know, there's so many things that you can do at home in that regard to start healing and strengthening and sort of, we say, building up your constitution or your resiliency, I guess.
Very good. Very good. So, Dr. Whitney, if listeners want to begin following you, connecting with you, reaching out and learning a little bit more from you, possibly consulting with you, how can they do that?
Super easy. I think I'm pretty easy to find. My practice is called Holistic Home Health and Wellness. So the website is www.hhh, so for Holistic Home Health, andwellness.net. That gets you to the website. Everything's there, but I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. You just search for Dr. Whitney, Holistic Home Health. It should pop up. I have a page for the practice, like I said, on Facebook, where I do the live Wellness Wednesdays every Wednesday at noon about some current topic. I think I'm going on week 6 about talking about COVID right now. But yeah, I think the most interaction I get is between Facebook and a little bit of Instagram. I'm building that up more right now. And then, you know, there's free consults and direct email messaging and things like that through the website as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Dr. Whitney. It's been such a pleasure and such an exciting conversation, given me a new set of angles and understanding about how to approach some decisions around food. So important right now too, because, you know, people are stuck at home, they're stressed. I mean, I know for a fact my life has been flipped upside down, right? And most of our lives have, and it becomes challenging, right, to make some of these decisions. And so hopefully, you know, it'd be cool to have you on a future episode where we can maybe talk more applied, maybe
Mhm.
some of the things that you like to do at home, some of the meals that you like to prepare for yourself, for your kiddos, which I know you have two
Yeah.
beautiful babies running around. So I think that it would be a great contribution for the people that are out there really looking for direction and for things that they can do on a day-to-day basis, if you'd be willing to do that.
Oh, absolutely. I love doing that kind of stuff. Anything I can share with people to give them the tools to take care of their own health is my big passion. So I really appreciate being able to talk about that today, and I'll look forward to it again in the future.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.